What is up, and welcome back to another episode of Tiger Pick'ems. My name is Lucas Parrish, and I am your host. We have a great show for you guys today, and I am joined by MUTV staffers Eleanor Sheehan and Zach Calder. How are you guys doing today?
Can't complain. Thanks for having us on the show this week.
Absolutely, really glad to have you guys on. Now, without giving any spoilers, any of you have an upset?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do have an upset
All right.
this week.
Well, I do too. Which is obviously last week we did not predict any upsets. In fact, we had no upsets, and there were upsets. So hopefully this week, I think that went to show that upsets need to be picked, and hopefully this week we will pick right. So sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy the show.
One of the games this week in the SEC is Texas A&M versus Mississippi State. Mississippi State, it shows you just how quickly things can change in this sport. 2 weeks ago, they destroyed LSU's defense, looking completely unstoppable. Mike Leach's offense looked genius. And now, after 2 straight losses to Arkansas and Kentucky, they're leaving a lot to be desired for Bulldogs fans. They're led on offense by quarterback KJ Costello, who this year has thrown for 1,168 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. That's obviously not a very good ratio. Leach's air raid system is really hit or miss, and so far this season, except for week 1 against LSU, it's really been miss. And then another surprise out of Mississippi State is running back Kylan Hill. He has done virtually nothing on the ground this year, and he, for me, is one of the top running backs in college football, and he's really done nothing. He's had 23 receptions for 237 yards and a touchdown, but as far as running the ball goes, he's done nothing, which is surprising for a running back of his caliber. And then moving on to Texas A&M, they're led by quarterback Kellen Mond. Mond this year's thrown for 845 yards, 7 touchdowns, and an interception. And they're also led by running back Isaiah Spiller, who has had a ridiculous 6.9 yards per carry this year on 46 attempts for 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. So as for my predictions for this game, I just don't think Mississippi State has it in them. I think their offensive system's struggling, and I have Texas A&M winning 38-17.
I don't know if there's any way, and I was saying the same thing about LSU and Mizzou. I don't know if there is any way that I see Mississippi State winning. I mean, Costello looked good week 1, right? Except, week 1 his stats were still 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Since then, he's thrown 7 picks to just 1 touchdown. Of course, Costello was a good quarterback at Stanford. There's definitely a chance that the season gets turned around for Mississippi State here. I have to agree with you. Kellen Mond is too talented. Kellen Mond is a guy who has led Texas A&M, and with no defense there, but has still managed to find the program a little bit of success. So far this year, found them a lot of success. They're ranked 11th right now for a reason. Texas A&M, 28, Mississippi State, 17.
I have to agree with you both. I think you made some great points. Texas is it's a stronger team, better offense. I say they're going to win 31-21.
Absolutely. I don't understand. I'm with you. I don't understand how Hill has not done anything more. It's baffling.
Yeah, he's going to be an NFL running back. I don't know.
You have to think there's something going wrong with the coaching there. If KJ Costello, who managed to produce at Stanford, is at 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, and Kylan Hill can't do anything. So, absolutely, Texas A&M is going to take this one.
Absolutely. And for the Auburn Tigers, they head to South Carolina this weekend to face the Gamecocks. The Auburn Tigers are 2-1 this season after coming off a close win against Arkansas last week. Led by quarterback Bo Nix, he has 597 passing yards with 4 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdowns. He is a strong leader for this Tigers offense. But one of their huge new talents this year is Tanks Bigsby. He is a freshman running back. He has 192 rushing yards, and he carries this offense. But also followed by Seth Williams with 216 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for the Tigers offense. And when we look at the Tigers defense, linebacker Zacoby McClain is leading the team with 32 tackles. But switching over to South Carolina, the hosting and definitely the underdogs for this team, they are currently 1-2, coming off a win last week versus Vanderbilt. Senior quarterback Kylan Hill has 698 passing yards with 3 touchdowns. Running back Kevin Harris supports this offense with 326 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. He is a scoring machine for the Gamecocks. Wide receiver Shea Smith with 271 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Those are the 3 key players. Again, Hill, Harris, and Smith for South Carolina. And now for South Carolina's defense. South Carolina defense is the second in the SEC behind Georgia, and first in the third down defense. So I think they're going to really contest against Auburn Tigers this week, going against this strong defense. Ernest Jones, linebacker, has 29 tackles and 1 sack. So yeah, I think this is going to be a good game for me. This is my upset game.
Yeah.
So I have South Carolina beating Auburn 21-17. I'm kind of rooting for the underdogs. South Carolina hasn't beat Auburn in years, but I think with injuries last week from Auburn barely beating Arkansas last week, I think South Carolina, this could be the year that they win.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Eleanor. South Carolina's got a good team with potential, but I really don't think they're ready to hang with the top class of the SEC, which I would classify Auburn in that as well.
Right.
Like, their one win this year is against Vanderbilt, which, not throwing shade towards Vanderbilt, they're
To
not
be fair, it was a pummeling of Vanderbilt,
True.
41-7. So
fair, but it's still Vanderbilt. They are the worst team in the SEC, for lack of a better term.
Thankfully, not Mizzou anymore.
No.
After our win last week against LSU, somehow it's not Mizzou anymore. But Auburn with Bo Nix and Seth Williams, their connection there, I just think they'll be able to take over the South Carolina defense, and that's why I have them going on the road this week and beating South Carolina.
You mentioned South Carolina not being able to hang with the top tier of the SEC. Is there a top tier of the SEC this season? I don't think there is. Because you look at Alabama, who almost got upset by Ole Miss. You look at LSU, the defending national champs, who got upset by Mizzou. You look at Arkansas, almost managing to upset Auburn. You look at Florida getting upset last week. I just don't see it. Texas A&M upset Florida. I don't think there's that top tier anymore. Auburn has shown that they are susceptible to losing. Absolutely. Bo Nix has not been what we expected him. I think he only has 4 passing touchdowns. His stats are not what we wanted to see coming into this season. The defense has been good at times, but also at times not particularly good. South Carolina, on the other hand, I think has looked even a little bit better. I know Auburn's overall still probably the better team. I still think South Carolina is going to win this one, 35-28. I think it's going to be decently high scoring. It's going to be a good game, that's for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to watch it. Now, typically after this next game, we would be talking about Mizzou's game. However, Mizzou was supposed to take on Vanderbilt at home, but that game was unfortunately canceled due to Vanderbilt players having COVID-19. So we're just going to touch on one more game today, and that is Georgia at Alabama. Starting with Georgia, quarterback Stetson Bennett, stepping in for a Jamie Newman who decided to sit out. So far, starting off pretty well. 53 of 84, 689 yards, 5 touchdowns to no interceptions. Running back Zamir White also looking good. 54 attempts, 209 yards, 4 touchdowns. And of course, their wide receiver Kyrus Jackson has started the season off well. 19 receptions, 209 yards, 1 touchdown. But the big thing for Georgia is their defense. They are really them and South Carolina are probably right now the 2 best defenses in the SEC. Georgia, week in and week out, continues to do it. The key for them to win this game is absolutely their defense. Moving on to Alabama. Alabama looked very, very susceptible last week, barely beating Ole Miss. Ole Miss took them to the wire. Quarterback Mac Jones, however, has looked very, very good. 66 for 83. 1,101 yards, 8 touchdowns to only 1 interception. Running back Najee Harris, though, has been the real star for Alabama. 52 attempts, 347 yards, 6.7 yards per carry, and an insane 10 rushing touchdowns through 3 weeks. He had 5 last week against Ole Miss has yet to have a game with less than 2. Najee Harris has been a stud so far. Then, of course, their 2 soon-to-be first-round wide receivers, Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, have so far combined for 46 receptions, 712 yards, and 5 touchdowns. The key to their game is the offense. I know we want to see Alabama's defense improve. Alabama's defense looked very bad against Ole Miss. But Georgia's defense is better. I think that's so what they need to do. They need to take this game to a shootout. If it becomes a shootout, Georgia loses. If it's not a shootout, I think Georgia wins. I overall still have Alabama winning. I think it will be a shootout. I have Alabama taking it 42-31.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be more of a shootout too. And I just think with Alabama's firepower offensively with Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, I just don't think Georgia's defense is great. But Alabama's offense, I think, is greater. And I know we were just talking about the top class of the SEC. Alabama, for me, is the top class of the SEC until they lose. And I don't see them losing at all this season, in a season like this. But it's also worth noting this week that Nick Saban tested positive for coronavirus, and he will not be on the sideline this week for Alabama. So I think that in itself will make the game a little bit tighter. But I still have Alabama pulling out the win, 38-31 over Georgia this week.
You make some good points. I know not having the head coach on the field is definitely going to be difficult, mostly because these are like the top tier teams, Georgia and Alabama. So, but I have to agree with you that Alabama's offense looks a little bit better than the Georgia's defense. So I have Alabama winning 35-28.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a close game, but at the end of the day, I think it'll turn into a shootout, and Alabama will win a shootout every single time. Thank you for tuning in. That does it for our show here at Tiger Pick'ems, because we don't have a Mizzou game to cover this week. Next week, we will be back at it with the packages of the teams that Mizzou plays. But for now, have a good week.